Hi, I'm Jonathan Knight, and this is B-Movie Madness. The movie I'm going to talk about tonight, let's find out. Curse of the Puppet Master. Now, I know what you're thinking. I might as well just throw that back in there and we'll review another movie, because that movie is shit. I hear you. But I really want to talk about this movie. Really want to talk about this movie. Because I have a history with this movie, among other things I want to talk about, and I even want to talk about this Blu-ray and the special features and everything. Before I talk about my personal history, a recap of the movie is it's the 6th movie in the Puppet Master franchise. It came out in 1998, so it's 20 years old, 20th anniversary, and it's about a man named Dr. McGrew, who is the current owner of the puppets, Andre Toulon's puppets, and he's obsessed with making his own puppet and transferring someone's soul into it. So he hires this young guy named Tank, who's innocent, slow-witted kind of guy who can really carve wood well, and ultimately he wants to transfer Tank's soul into the puppet that he is carving. Or as they call him, Robert, but Tank. Because Dr. McGrew can't carve a puppet, so he has to hire someone else to do it. This movie, when it came out, I remember I got the Fangoria. I can't remember what issue it was, but I remember reading throughout it, and then I turned the back, and on the back was this poster right here. And I thought, oh my god, there's a new Puppet Master movie coming out. I was so excited. Sadly, at this point, the mom and pop video store I used to go to became one of the franchise ones. I can't remember which one it was, but it wasn't Blockbuster, I know that much. And they did not carry full moon titles, new or old. So eventually I had to wait until it aired on Cinemax. And when it aired on Cinemax, it did not air until like 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, and I had school. I was allowed to get up and record it. I recorded it on SP, because usually I did movies on EP, that way I could fit a whole bunch of them, but this movie is so special to me, I used the whole tape to record it. Well, about 78 minutes of the tape. And I watched it, and I loved it. When I got back from school, I watched it 2, 3 more times, and I watched it a lot in like the first week I taped it. And, I loved the movie, and as I gotten older, I ended up getting an official copy on VHS from, like, a pawn shop. And I didn't really go back to it that much. The first 5 movies I went back to repeatedly, because I love the first 5 Puppet Master movies. But this one I just stopped going back to. And in the back of even when I first watched the movie, in the back of my mind, I knew it wasn't as good as those first 5, but it was a new Puppet Master movie, so I was excited. And in the back of my mind, I also knew that most of the puppet action was stock footage from the first 5 movies. I just didn't care, because again, it was a new Puppet Master movie. And, eventually I just stopped liking it, and the only Puppet Master movies that I just acknowledged were the first 5. Anything after 5, what I call the Paramount years. That's when Paramount Pictures was funding the Full Moon movies. Anything after that, I just didn't care about. As I've gotten older, I went back and watched a lot of the Full Moon stuff they did after the Paramount deal fell apart. And there's some really good movies. Head of the Family, Blood Dolls, The Dead Hate the Living. There's some really good, solid films in there. Sadly, Curse of the Puppet Master is not one of those films. And the problem is, with like this film, unlike Dead Hate the Living, Blood Dolls, this has 5 other movies before it to compare it to. Same thing happened with Subspecies. Subspecies 4 is not good as the first 3 because you got those first 3 to compare it to. And the main problem with this movie is, after Puppet Master 5, they planned on doing a trilogy of movies called Puppet Wars. And it was gonna, the scripts are online, and in the description below I will give you a link to the scripts so you can read them. And the scripts are amazing, and they're so cool. But sadly, when they went, Full Moon and Paramount went their separate ways, they couldn't get the funding to do those movies. And the first Puppet Wars movie was called Curse of the Puppet Master. Eventually, Full Moon went into the toy business, and they started releasing toys of the puppets. But the problem is, they had toys, but they had no movie. So they needed a movie to go with the toys. So Charles Band called up David Dakota and said, I need a new Puppet Master movie, and I need it cheap and quick. So he gave him very little money and 8 days to make the movie. Now, from the very beginning of the movie, or before they started the movie, they decided they were gonna use stock footage for the puppet action. And they knew they would have to do that because there's not a lot they can do in 8 days with the special effects and all that. So they decided, just use the stock footage, and they wrote a new script. They didn't use the Curse of the Puppet Master script for Puppet Wars because there's no way they could have done it in 8 days with that budget. It's sad, but true. So they went and they used a new story for this. Now, when I saw Curse of the Puppet Master in 1998, I thought the story was actually pretty cool and original and an interesting direction to go. Years later, I watched a little movie from 1973 called Hiss. You don't say it, you hiss it. It's really gay. I didn't mean to do it like that. And as I was watching this movie, like it really felt familiar. Like I've seen this movie before, but I hadn't seen this movie before. And then it got to one point in the movie where a bully character ends up killing one of the pet snakes, and they get revenge on the bully by putting a poisonous snake in the shower with him. It was at that point where I was like, oh my god. Curse of the Puppet Master ripped this movie off. It just didn't rip this movie. It took scenes from this movie and recreated them. It just didn't have the story. It had exact scenes from the movie. And then on the commentary for this, David Okoto does say that they use that movie as a basis. He doesn't say the name of the movie for legal reasons, but you know what movie he's talking about. And after watching, Hiss, I'm like, I no longer can say that the plot for this movie is original and daring because it really isn't. It's the exact same plot of the other movie, just with puppets instead of snakes. It's almost like they took the script of the movie, crossed out the word snake, and wrote puppet in its place. It's the exact same movie, just not as good. This is not as good as Hiss. Hiss is incredible. Highly recommend checking that out. But this is nowhere near as good. The thing about this movie is, even if it ripped off that movie, I still like the plot of the movie. The biggest problem with this movie is the execution. The whole movie is built up with the character of Tank carving this puppet, and then he's going to get transferred into it by Dr. McGrew. So you're waiting the whole movie to see what this puppet looks like. Mind you, he's carving this puppet out of wood. And when it finally reveals the puppet, it is a robot with an arm that shoots electricity out of it. I will repeat that. It's a robot with an arm that shoots electricity out of it. He was carving this out of wood. Wood magically became a robot. It makes no fucking sense. And I'm usually game. Like, if it was a shitty looking wooden robot, I'd be okay. Or a wooden puppet, I'd be okay with it. They didn't have the budget. They didn't have the time. But it makes no fucking sense. You can tell that they ran out of ideas and time, and they threw whatever at the screen. Not only that, the puppet, the Tank puppet, a robot, looks like shit. It has a TV screen head where you can see his real face, inside the TV. And it just looks like shit. It's not even cool looking. And the whole movie, you're waiting to see what this puppet looks like, and it looks like dog shit. It looks like something they came up with the last fucking second. And they only had 8 days, so they probably like, here you go. One thing I will say, though, is the gore-wise, this is probably one of the gorier ones of the series, not counting the Lilith Reich. This is pretty gory, and that's one thing I will give this movie. It does have some decent gore in it, and it probably has one of my favorite kills of the franchise, and that's when the bully character is killed by Blade and Tunneler. Blade slices his eyes open, and Tunneler drills him in the balls. And it's really gory and cool. There's 2 cops that get killed. It's bloody. Dr. McGrew's death is fairly bloody. It's gore-wise good. And the puppets themselves, I'm not talking about the stock footage. I'm talking about the new footage with the puppets. The puppets look great. Probably because they're the David Allen puppets from the previous 5 movies. So they look great. And, this wasn't like the Axis of Trilogy or Axis of Evil trilogy, which the puppets look like shit. The puppets look great in this movie. So you got the gore, you got the puppets. Story is, even though it's a ripoff, it's cool. The execution is poor. The acting is serviceable. I think everybody does an okay job. I think it's not the strongest acting of the series. I thought, I believe his name is George Peck that plays Dr. McGrew. He does a really good job of it, because much like the character in Hiss, this is a guy who doesn't come across as evil. He thinks what he's doing is right, and George Peck does a good job of portraying that. The guy that plays Tank, Josh Green, he does a good job of just being an overall likable, nice guy who gets sucked into this, whole puppet thing. And the daughter, she's okay. I can't remember her name. She's very forgettable. And the bully character, even though he's harassing this girl, and I'm not saying this in a negative way, but he comes across as gay, even though he's not gay. The actor does, anyways. He could be gay. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. I know David Dakota is gay. Maybe that's the reason. But David's a nice guy, so I can't say anything bad about him. But overall, yeah, this is a really. I mean, when I found out, like, David Dakota is not credited in the movie as director. It's Victoria Sloan. He was using a different name for this, and Retro Puppet Master. So when I found out it was the director of Puppet Master 3 did this, I was like, no. Because Puppet Master 3 is my absolute favorite of the entire franchise. I love that movie. I will defend that movie. There's some people who prefer 2. I love 2 as well, but, I love 3. Really like 3. But when you learn the reasons he had to make this as basically a toy commercial, very quick, with very little money, hence why he ripped off a familiar story. Well, familiar to horror fans or whatever. Why he used stock footage. And some of the stock footage, I'll give them this, some of the stock footage is edited well into the movie. Some of it is not edited well at all and it does not match, but some of it actually works really well. As for this Blu-ray, now on the cover on the full moon side, there's a little disclaimer here, and it's on the back here, and when you play the movie, basically they could not find a complete version of this movie in its original, let me see, in its original 35mm negative, they could not find the entire movie, so they eventually what they had to do is take pieces from the original 35mm negative, a standard definition print, and I think it's called, a digibeta videotape. So most of the time the movie looks really fucking good, but sometimes it just looks kind of because that's all they had to work with. The movie wasn't kept in great shape, I guess, and they just had to use what they had to make it complete. This movie, it still looks, I would say 75% of the time, maybe 70% of the time, it looks way better than any of the other releases. The differences in our quality are there. You can tell, when it's, the standard def, when it's the high def. But, I mean, they did their best to give us a complete version of this movie, and for the fans, and there are fans of this one, perfect. But the main reason to get this Blu-ray, is the director's commentary by David Dakota. His commentaries are always fantastic, but this one is probably my favorite one. He goes into extreme detail, not only about the Blu-ray here, about why they had to source it from different prints, but about the production, about Full Moon in general, about the movies he was making during this time, like Shrieker, everything. And he goes about the actors, about how George Peck, who played Dr. McGrew, was sick the first day and he didn't come in, so they had to shoot a double. It's just really interesting stuff. It's non-stop information. Like right off the bat, he talks about how, I need to re-listen to it. I might be wrong, but I think he does say that the print was not kept in the best of, conditions, which is why they had to source it from like 4 to 5 different places. No, 3 different places. But it's just a great track. There's the video zones on there too. This was at the point they still did the video zones. After they left Paramount, they did the video zones for a while, then they disappeared. And then he brought them back for, I think, Access Rising, and then they disappeared again. But this is just, because I kind of grew up with this movie, I cannot completely hate it. It's really hard for me to hate this movie because I have such a fondness for it, because, I grew up with it. But it just, you can tell it was definitely a step down, both budget and time-wise, from the first 5. And it's really sad that we never got to see the Puppet Wars trilogy, because it sounds amazing. And like I said before, I will include both the the link to the scripts and the link to the puppet or master Wikipedia or the wiki whatever page so that you can just get more information. There's a poster on there. It looks incredible. But this is one more thing I want to say is at the beginning of the movie, Dr. McGrew, the Tank is not his first assistant. He has another guy that he ends up, trying to turn into a puppet. Doesn't turn out well, so he burns him alive. That puppet it's called Freak, is really freaky looking, and it's one of the best parts of the movie. Like that's one of my, the gore, the puppet's looking actually good, and the Freak puppet are like the highlights of the movie. But and I think the poster is really cool too. I've always liked the poster. When I saw it in February, I was like, that's fucking cool. I don't have no idea what that movie's about. They're turning a guy into a puppet. And they actually don't really do. There's a dream sequence like this, but this don't actually happen. One more thing. For the Blu-ray, they redid the digital effects in the finale. When it came out in the 90s, it had the very typical late 90s video digital effects that looked awful. Even back then, they look even worse now. And for this Blu-ray, they redid them and they look 10 times better. Much improved. Now, they didn't change the Tank puppet, so he still looks like shit. But all the visual effects, like the electricity beam that comes out of his gun, looks 10 times better. This review is going on longer than I thought it would be. So I'm going to cut it short. Curse the Puppet Master. If you're a hardcore Puppet Master fan, you've already seen it. You know how you feel about it. But even if you don't like it, I highly recommend it just for the director's commentary track. It's really interesting. And if you haven't seen it, I will include a trailer at the end so you can take a look at it. And then I will also include a video to the other side of the screen for my last review. I'm Jonathan Knight. This is B Movie Madness. Thanks for watching.